Thank you. I'm very honored to be here. So we have about, an hour and 45 minutes left. So I'm going to read from page 300 to page 385. So it takes, and then we can, I don't know, take 2 questions and go home if you want. Right. So thank you, Eleni. Very honored that you gave me these. But in fact, you don't realize that it's selfish. If you refuse all honors, it makes life very easy. It's not out of, so there's nothing lofty about it. It's very convenient. One, because then if you don't have any honorary degrees, you're no longer competing with schmucks who have a lot of them. Right? So that's the idea. You're not competing with them. So they because they're going to have. Plus, the other problem is you got to fly to a town, get an honorary degree, spend 2 days, have dinner with, sitting next to the dean. Wear jackets, and so you waste 3 days of your life to get them. Whereas here, I get the same effect without getting them, without doing anything. That's really for convenience more than anything else. Nothing lofty, not like outside the system. That's the first thing. The second point, in fact, it hit me while writing this book. I thought that Nietzsche was of the origin of that dichotomy between the Dionysian and the Apollonian, until I saw a hint in Seneca. In fact, that you had the 3 forces: the Apollonian, the Dionysian, the Bacchus for Latins, and then Hercules in the middle for strength. So here you have reason, intuition, or some kind of dark forces, this dark knowledge that connects us to something deep in us that we don't understand, and the third one is strength. So in fact, Seneca, and the more I read of Seneca, the more I discover stuff. Especially the best thing to do is never, if you have any book written about Seneca by someone other than Seneca, you should put it on a curb, the recycle, the recycling. Don't give it to a library because it may harm people. The Seneca has been traduced by the academic establishment, and in fact it's much deeper than we think. So there's a third force, but you're right. So Nietzsche revived that idea. Unfortunately, of course, it took us a long time to understand Nietzsche, if there's something to understand. But Seneca, been around for 2,000 years. It's limpid, crystal clear, and these dichotomies. This trichotomy is right there. So thanks. I'm going to talk about Antifragile for a minute. And then she's right about the math, because now, to relax, because I had a rough time with book tours, talking to people, getting bored, getting on planes, that kind of stuff. So I'm writing a math textbook to correspond to the thing. So if you want, I can answer from a math textbook, and I have it with me in my pocket because it's sort of a refuge. So you can express something mathematically, particularly when it contradicts mathematical method to express things mathematically, Sort of it's a meta problem, where the best way to destroy something is from within, not from outside. So the main idea in here is the Turkey problem, okay? The main idea is the prevalence of Turkey problem. The Turkey problem is when you think you understand something and you don't. You're the Turkey. The non-Turkey, visibly, is someone who knows what he doesn't understand. He's going to get less in trouble. And we've had, of course, a lot of Turkey problems since the Enlightenment. And the entire idea of the black swan was Turkey problems. But when you explain it with a metaphor of the Turkey, nobody understands it. If you put 40 pages of equations, then people understand it right away. Why? Effectively, John Faithfull explained it to me. He said, if I am very intelligible, nobody's going to retain anything. Nobody's going to make an effort to listen to me. If you make it a notch harder, or 2 notches harder, they invest themselves, they're going to like it better, they're going to remember more, and you switch gear from what Kahneman calls system 1 to system 2, or the reverse. I don't know which system is which. So you switch gear from one system to the other. That explains the oddity that people who go on TED, dance on a stage to get attention. Nobody remembers what they said, but people who are like. The mechanism of overcompensation I discuss in Antifragile is if you make people overcompensate with something hard, then they understand it better. Okay, this is why speakers who are difficult to understand, are higher demand than those who are easy to understand. even if they're saying the same thing. Okay, so I realized that, so I put something in math now, and suddenly, like a miracle, people who hated the black swan, oh, it was wonderful, why didn't you say that before? I said the fucking thing before, in 200 pages. so this is what I'm working on now, all right? And I'm now up to chapter 9, okay? It's on the web for free. And chapter 10, I think chapter 9 is Antifragile, start with Antifragile, the idea of we don't know what's going on, but there are a lot of things we understand. Let's focus on these. And the things we understand, we don't understand risk. We understand fragility. We can measure fragility, we can talk about fragility, we can describe fragility. So before talking about anti-fragility, let me talk about fragility. It hit me after, I'm very slow, after 20 some years of dealing with volatility, variability, okay, that was my specialty, my profession, dealing with volatility. It hit me suddenly that what doesn't like variability is fragile. I mean, granted, I'm very slow, 21 years to figure out something as trivial as that. Except that I realized that nobody else has written about it. I started asking people around, yeah, it makes sense, but fragility was never equated to disliking volatility. And this is quite crucial for one simple reason. Because there's a strong property of what doesn't like variability has to have some kind of nonlinear response, number one. And two, whatever has a nonlinear response doesn't like variability. The two-way, the effect. And let me explain that simple point, okay, at the core of everything. And from there we go why systems love errors, why systems don't love error, why it's good to live in Montreal, where you go from 23 degrees Fahrenheit to 80 here and sweating, you see, where you have these variabilities that you wouldn't get if you lived in Phoenix. No, you'd get it in Phoenix. If you lived in San Diego, for example. Why stop complaining about the weather in Montreal, why starvation once in a while is not bad, stuff like that. So let me explain now that point very simply, what is fragility? Which didn't have a definition. And from there we can define robustness, we can define everything else. If you had, imagine, I mean, you guys are using now strange synthetic material, no? That, right? Hasn't been around for too long and won't be around for too long. But let's assume that you're using good Phoenician glass, right? Invented 3,000 years ago, that's still being used. I saw it at a restaurant 10 minutes ago. Okay, you put it on a table here. Assume that's it, right? Would the glass benefit from an earthquake? No. Simple definition, what has more downside than upside from random events is fragile. If there's an earthquake, it's not going to benefit from it. Okay, simple. If you plot it on a graph, it has more downside than upside. Okay. And corollary, very simple thing. If I jump 10 meters, I get harmed. I don't know about Montreal because Quebec is special, but typically in most other provinces of Canada, people get harmed. No, you die at 10 meters, okay? But if you jump 1 meter, you're not harmed at all. It's not a fraction. You don't have a tenth of the harm, no? You have much less than a tenth of the harm if you jump 1 meter. As a matter of fact, you don't have any harm. So it means that every additional meter hurt you more than the previous one. Simple, that's concavity. You're concave, you have accelerating sensitivity to harm. If I ride a bicycle at 30 kilometers an hour and smash it against this wall, you get yelled at and probably you will lose a nose or something, all right, in the process. No? But if you do it 300 times at a tenth of a kilometers an hour, you're not going to get the same harm. So it means that you're accelerating harm. That also comes from the fact that you have more upside than downside. If the market goes down 10% and you harm more than 10 times if the market went down 1%, you don't like volatility. So this is a very simple definition of fragility. Once you go from there, from that definition of fragility, you can do a lot of things. The first things you can identify what's fragile, from local sensitivity to acceleration. You can figure out in portfolios, you can figure out if something's over-optimized simply from that concavity. And it's a little technical. You don't have, luckily we don't have a graph. I told you I'm in my platonic phase where I'm doing math. Once you get into a graph, it's over, all right? So I'm glad we don't have one, but if you plot it, you realize that the linear cannot harm you, because the linear, to have a big exposure, would harm you early, not later. If we were linear to earthquakes, we wouldn't be around, okay? If things on Earth are breakable, because there are about 4 million earthquakes a year that are at the first couple notches on a Geiger scale. There are 4 million of them a year. But you go up to 6, much fewer, and those are a lot more damaging. It means we're very nonlinear to harm from earthquakes. If we were linear, you'd be blown up. Same thing, if I'm harmed jumping 10 meters, if it were linear, same harm, cumulatively, just walking to the office would kill you. So now we have a definition of fragility. From that, we can say, okay, what is fragile? Package on which you write, handled with care, because it doesn't like variability, volatility. The opposite is something that wants mishandling, up to a point. That's it. So that's the whole thing, is focusing mostly on fragility, and the opposite in some domains. And robustness is what doesn't care. The Brooklyn Bridge doesn't care. If you have a package that's robust, you don't say, please don't mishandle. You don't care. You don't say, I don't care. Even in Brooklyn, they don't say, I don't care. Or they think it, but they don't say it. Right? So that's a robust. So here we have 3 categories of objects. What I'm saying isn't particularly innovative, that there are things that gain from volatility, because I was an option trader, and that's what we dealt with. I think the obvious thing that we can use is aside from the integration of all of this in a coherent worldview, is the fact that fragility is what doesn't like volatility. And that step is very small, but has some payoffs. So this whole book, you realize one thing, is that we're not fine-tuned intellectually, all right, for the modern world. The first thing is that we're not good at dealing with information. The map we have today of the world, the risk map, is completely messed up by the New York Times. If you can, do something to make it go bust, please, that would help humanity, or other media. Because 7,000 US Americans die every day, but the risk map is a hurricane that killed 3, not high fructose corn sugar that killed 2,200 the previous day, you see, and stuff like that. So you have a messed up risk map. Why? Because the sensational and naturalistic environment is the statistical. In our world, sensational is not the statistical. That's the divorce I mentioned in Fooled by Randomness. I thought it was trivial. It's getting worse since I wrote my book. All right, so it was 12 years ago I published it 12 years ago. Since then, the effect is worse, okay? So you see, we don't have a good, our methods of understanding and liking and disliking things aren't adapted to the real world, okay? Like we have a taste for sugar because sugar was scarce, so it was harmless, and it was good because you need it in small quantities, so you'd go to the honey source and stuff like that. But now that it's widely available, you develop diabetes, okay? So where we have a disconnect with respect to things that are random is that we are made for an environment that is random while never having control of the environment, which is a good thing, you see. We're made to seek stability in the thermal domain, but we never had control of temperature up until recent days. So now what happened is that we're throwing the baby with the bathwater. 0 degrees kills people when you're standing outside. So we don't have a system that says, okay, spending some time at 0 degrees is okay. So you're made to systematically dislike it, but we had no choice. Likewise with food, we're made to eat and I'm designed genetically to eat every single piece of chocolate I run into, which is nice. To walk through airports is very inconvenient for me. So the best way to walk through airports is find corridors without chocolate vendors, all right? But you're made to, okay, so we're not, the same thing with randomness. We dislike randomness because it's what kills you. Forgetting that in some degree, that's nonlinearity that Eleni was mentioning, in some degree it helps you. Okay? With the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, came a greater control over our environment. So what did we get? The smoothness. We dislike, we remove everything, you know. We want to smooth out the economic cycles. It's okay, but you blow them up. You want to smooth out the forest fires, it's okay, but without fires, the forest blows up. You want to make people comfortable, okay, but their bone density goes down. You make people walk on smooth surfaces, you injure them. So they have to go do yoga, they pay a lot of money after yoga, all that kind of stuff, right? To fix the arthritis they get from yoga, all come from not having variation in the environment in the form of, you know. So good, small amount of variation is good for us. Plus, with the Enlightenment came, what I discuss here in book 1, is this complete misunderstanding of the difference between organic and engineered. And I call it mistaking the cat for a washing machine. The organic, and that's a big mistake made by people who think that the economy is not a clock, all right? If it were a clock, it needs constant repairman, all right? Is it like an organism, then it self-heals, because the repairman can can mess it up by no, sorry, I didn't know I was recorded, so I had to remind you. So, and don't tell the publisher you're recording it. So So the problem of not understanding that the organic requires stressors to function, it also comes from this representation of humans as something mechanistic rather than organic, and life as an information machine. When you have a car, you put fuel into it, it's not getting information, it's just getting energy, right? But when you ingest stuff, then you have information about your environment coming at the same time with food. That's, more complex system have these less, simplified reaction to things. So you're getting information. When you're fast, you're getting information about the environment. Anyway, so we live in an environment today that's too cushy, or we try to make it too cushy. You fragilize everything cushy. And these category of people who do that are the fragilistas. That's it. So this is sort of like the first part of the book, where you explain how nobody had a word for iatrogenics. Iatrogenics means harm done by the healer. The Greek word, like everything in medicine is in Greek, incidentally. You know why? Because doctors are smart. They charge you a lot more by giving you a disease with a Greek name than its English description. That's the only reason, right? So this is for commercial reasons. So you take you more seriously. Lawyers, the doctors took the first word, so Greek, the first language. The lawyers are left with Latin, right? And economists are left with common languages like English. Anyway, so iatrogenics is harm done by the healer, side effects. Complex systems are very hard to deal with because you have multiplicity, what are called you have multiplicative branching side effects. But there are ways to deal with them. Removal of something harmful doesn't have, if you stop someone from smoking, you don't have side effects. So I used a Latin, not Greek word called via negativa for some ways to handle complex systems. So this is sort of like my idea of the mistakes we make not understanding the world. Then I take the idea into a lot of things. If you're made for variation, then the dimension of what you look at visually has to matter. You agree? Okay. You show someone a picture of nature, they never find it ugly. All right. This room, unless you're conditioned, it's very hard to find it attractive, right? You know what I'm saying? The building is beautiful, so on, but I'm giving an example of something. It's the most beautiful Euclidean structure, but nevertheless, why? Because you don't have the dimension. Look at this wall. It doesn't exist in nature. So if you're programmed to get random food or variation in food frequency, not 3.5 meals a day with 2200.2 calories, all right? So the same thing, you're not supposed to look at this wall. There's actually very little in nature that's like this, except when you're on a ship and looking at the horizon. You can see something similar. Other than that, impossible. No geometric shapes, identifiable geometric shapes in nature. It's a different geometry, so richer. Same with a lot of things that we are convex. Okay, in other words, to a lot of things. I'd rather have, say, 1,000 calories today, 3,000 tomorrow, than 2,200 2 days in a row. It means I like variability. Up to a point, you are convex to these. That's not part of the medical vocabulary. Okay, and there are iatrogenics in making people have everything steady. So this is sort of like one of the ideas of the book. Now, the book, I wrote it in 7 sections, making sure that no title or subtitle can give you the slightest idea what's inside. All right? Okay, like one chapter called Saturday Evening in London, right? Okay, the other one is your rent, okay, one subsection. Or can a whale fly like an eagle, right? That's, so make sure, so you have to read the whole thing to understand what I'm talking about. Or I'll give the other alternative there are 485 pages of dense mathematics on the web, recycled and linear book. So you have 2 options, but there's no journalistic low-dimension book. Try to follow a fractal geometry, right, all the way through the thing. So there's 7 books here, completely separate. All related, after you state the problem, all related to convexity. Things that like convexity that are deprived of convexity, things that have complex responses, things that are fragilized. Book, so it applies to political systems. Why city-states, why distributing errors is a lot better than concentrating them. You live in the right place, Canada, where they distribute errors. So it's not, stop making them, you're not going to stop making any mistakes. So you distribute errors, while municipal systems are a lot more solid than centralized ones. Why large corporations are doomed to fail except when the state props them up artificially, and then everybody fails, right? Why you don't have a lot of, why you have, I don't know, several, 1 order of magnitude more rats in New York than elephants on the planet, okay? Because small, when you get large, you're concave to harm. While large firms, when they have a problem, they pay a lot more per unit than small. Why projects in the UK that are £100 million have 30% more cost overruns than projects that are £10 million. You can see that in size. It's all the same curve, whenever you see the concave curve. That's sort of, I explained, so you can already identify what's fragile, what's not fragile. And then there's a book that tells you that time is smarter than humans. Go back to the Dionysian, because time filters things. It understands things we don't, or visibly, if they survive, it means they're not very fragile. Why something that's not perishable? If I see a technology or something that's not perishable, like a theory or a book, not the physical book, but a book, the informational aspect of the book, if an old one compared to a young one, the older is supposed to outlive the young one. Whereas it's the opposite when you see human. If you see an 80-year-old man and a 20-year-old next to a 20-year-old, you can expect, bearing any disease or exception, the 20-year-old to outlive the 80-year-old. It's the opposite with things that have survived. This is why, especially if you don't, particularly, I'm glad Jean-Louis is here, because he had this idea that things that have survived that are irrational are likely to stay even longer. Okay? I mean, they have a hidden thing in them. There's characters there, Fat Tony, and he's the one who represents Nietzsche in that debate with Socrates, where he tells him, but it was in a Brooklyn accent, that your problem is that you think that what we cannot explain is stupid. Well, stupid, S-T-O-O-P-I-D. That's how they say it in Brooklyn, right? So I'm from northern Lebanon, so I can't be perfectly Brooklyn, but Fat Tony is good at it. And of course, he intimidates Socrates, right? So there's this idea of time is fragility. So we're substituting understanding things to understanding the fragility. And of course, technology and discovery in here, it comes from the opposite of fragile, is when you make money from mistakes, you make money, you benefit from variation, errors, and stuff like that. So you show that trial and error vastly outperform design. But we have this love of the Apollonian. We love university now. Actually, I'm a university professor, so I can badmouth universities. So, and this idea that knowledge comes from universities is the biggest scam you can think of, designed mostly by real estate agents and university administrators to convince us to give them more money. Because typically knowledge is generated by tinkering, and it's recycled later by university, and you can see it in the numbers. And you can see it in any form of number. Well, the countries that had no education, all right, were poor. Okay, what did they get? Education first and then wealth, or wealth first and education? Well, it's of course, wealth first and education. Why places like England during the Industrial Revolution were vastly, a lot more performing, I would say, relative to the rest of the world, when they had no education. They had aggressiveness. Why? Because they had more upside than downside. Anti-fragile tinkering. And I just worked it out after finishing this book. It's going to be in this textbook that will, I insist, be unreadable, hence very red, right? The equivalent, a tinkerer, to match a tinkerer with intelligence, you need 1,000 IQ points. An aggressive tinkerer, right? Like Silicon Valley startups and stuff like that. To match that with understanding, I call it Soviet Harvard approach, where you design things thinking you understand the world versus discovering them as you go. So, so this is, I'm progressing through taking the ideas through different stages in the book. I'm not saying universities are bad. I'm saying that, or knowledge is bad. I'm saying the formation of knowledge doesn't have the top-down shape that we think it has. It's more like a bottom-up enterprise. And of course the policies that would come with it. And I presented that in National Science Foundation, and they said, well, we've always said that. I said, yeah, but you don't apply this. We didn't have an equation. All right, now you have an equation. Say, okay. Right. So, but the equation is as follows. When you have optionalities, an option, anyone here who knows an option would realize that an out-of-money option reacts a lot more to volatility, more uncertainty, than it does to changes in the mean of the underlying, because of convexity. Like uncertainty benefits an option a lot more than if it's a call, the market going in your direction. You see, and that's what's central mathematically, that you can apply to things. So, and an option is a tool for anti-fragility. It loves volatility if you own it. So here we explain how a lot of things we took for granted. So I had to borrow from a lot of people. I didn't do the history myself. I took book or researchers. A lot of them are university professors, some are the World Bank, who figured out that in fact, the engine of technological growth and understanding is tinkering. And the numbers are obvious. The 3 main Silicon Valley firms, 3 college dropouts, right? So, or you take the 5 most influential thinkers were either not academics or only became academic after they became, famous thinkers. Whether Einstein, Darwin, Marx, not that Marx was, if you consider him a thinker, assuming, Freud or others. You see, the same. So the tinkering doesn't go very well within institutional frameworks. And then continue. Now, the book, because there's several books again, because of uncertainty in the world and stuff like that, I said I'm not going to wait to write 7 books. I'll put them all in one, all right? And I'm done, and I can relax. So book 7 should have been a book on its own. People told me, but I put it in there. I call it Skin in the Game. And that's the one that elicits most emotions on part of people. It's as follows. Visibly, if you have more upside than downside, you are anti-fragile. You welcome volatility. If you have more downside than upside, you're fragile. It so happened that the way society is structured these days, there's a class of people who have more upside than downside, but they transfer the downside to others. So called transfer of fragility to the system. Bankers, they get the upside, and they transfer the downside to the system. Bureaucrats, the same. So one advantage of decentralization is, can you hear me well from the back or no? Not well? Okay. So I can hear, let me put my glasses so I can see reactions. You can hear it, no? Okay, good. So or maybe they don't want to hear. Some don't want to hear what I have to say. So in the system of the modern system has been intellectualized. When you're intellectualized, you have a severe problem. Is the harm, you make a mistake and risk, the risk domain, the harm doesn't go to the person who made the risk, who caused the risk, who harmed others. It goes to someone else, and it's not seen. That's, again, heterogenics. A bureaucrat can harm all he wants. He has a spreadsheet looking at him. Whereas someone who lives in a village is less likely to make a mistake because people are going to shame him when he goes to the grocery store, okay? So you have that effect of decentralization, but you have other things that come with it. Is that at no time in the history of mankind have we had as many people in position of power with as little downside to themselves, okay? You've heard of this guy, who the head of CIA, what's his name, Petraeus? Okay, and there have been biographies written about him. So I thought that the fellow was a commando. He would climb walls like Batman, all right, throw grenades from little holes, all right, and then run in a boat at night, some kind of thing, that kind of stuff. So that's what I thought. And I went on his Wikipedia page, and you had pages and pages of decorations from Malta, for example. Very impressive, decoration from Malta. So pages and decorations, about hundreds of them, all right. So you say, hey, this guy's. It turned out that the person the closest he got to war was a video game. All right, when he was, that was. But one generation ago, you had George Bush the father. Okay, who was a war. He was in war. I mean, his plane fell in the Pacific. So you have. So this is a new generation where you have bankers making mistakes, not being harmed by them. And it's not from it doesn't come from capitalism. When Goldman Sachs was a partnership, it was very capitalistic, but they didn't make the same mistakes. Now that you foot the bill, okay? I don't know, you're not US taxpayer, but still, all right? So this is part of this transfer of fragility to the system. And I was wondering, how did the idea come to me? I was wondering, hey, why is it that economists are always wrong, the system is wrong, everything is wrong, but the system hasn't been busted, okay? I realized, hey, you know what? They don't pay for their mistakes, someone else pays for it, you see? So you can't, how do you pierce a system? By having people accountable for their mistakes. Someone else who's, why do predictors keep predicting? So here I have three classes of people today, that there's a class of very, very small number of people who harm others and no harm to themselves. Otherwise, they would have exited the gene pool. Journalists, the non-war correspondent journalists, some class of journalists, they make predictions, they talk about the market. This is why I find it very unethical to give you a prediction. I tell you what I've done. I want to be harmed first by my mistake. If you give someone a prediction, they're going to take a lot more risk. So there is this class of people, all right, economists, stuff like that. They harm others at no risk to themselves. Bureaucrats. It's less than 1% of the population, by the way. Okay. Then you have in the middle, the bulk, ethically calibrated people. They eat their own cooking. In other words, they're harmed by their own mistakes. They don't harm others, but they don't overly help others. And then there's the saints, the class of saints. People who take the downside for the sake of others. And the idea came to me when I corresponded with a firefighter. And he said, how come your ideas on risk are so easy? I thought about it. I said, this guy's a firefighter. How can he be wrong, all right? And I said, this guy doesn't get a bonus. People, a cop, so many of them killed in Mexico, they don't have the upside. They just have downside. They don't get a bonus. you see? So people have more downside than others for the sake of others, more downside than upside for the sake of others. The class of saints, and we used to have many more of them. And then, of course, you ethically calibrate in the middle. And you want to bust that 1% fake, what I call them, whatever it's called, ethically non-calibrated people. And this is where, developing the good kind of enemies. All right? Because visibly, if they don't take risks, they're not going to have a lot of courage. All right. And of course, Eleni is we correspond. We have a little web community where we correspond. She's from Sparta. Are you still from Sparta?
All right.
Okay. She's from Sparta, so she understands the honor of risk taking, and the honor of standing up for your ideas. And of course, the Spartans had their code of honor. Okay, it's all based on how much risk you take for the sake of the community, society, of the family, the honor of the family, everything, but also society. And of course, later on to the Confederation. They were the big fighters for the Confederation, the Greek Confederation, not you guys. And then, and of course, then the notion of courage switched. The two most famous, the most influential persons in history were two Eastern Mediterranean who died, not in battle, but for the sake of their ideas. One of whom we mentioned earlier, the gadfly Socrates, all right? And then there's a different form of intellectual courage, you see? And, my book 7 on ethics bothers some people and, of course, gratifies others, all right? So I get hate mail every day, and I'd like to get more from journalists. I mean, I don't need to do hate mail. The smear campaigns abound. But at the same time, I get nice letters from service people, servicemen, or firefighters. Or, I'm risking my life, no bonus. The Goldman Sachs guy is risking my life, my taxes, and getting a bonus. More upside than upside. And people misunderstand optionality, that asymmetry, okay? The stock market is about what it was 12, 13 years ago. You would think that the compensation of managers is zero. In fact, no. Net in the US, investors lost $2 trillion, comparatively. Managers of the company made $500 billion because they had the upside. Those who made money, all right? You don't have those who lost money in the company didn't pay for it, so you have that asymmetry. So that's sort of, it should have been a book, but I'm tired of packaging things. I have one. Actually, what I'm doing is instead of having a lot of books, I'm remerging all my books in one called Inserto. That's easier. So what did you write? Inserto. Okay, never heard of it, but it sounds interesting, right? One book, Inserto. I'm merging my books rather than dividing them. And this will be the technical appendix for the Inserto, okay? So book 7 is the one that seems to stir people. And in it, I talk about a lot of other forms of ethics. I talk about how predictions, like, for example, if people were harmed by their mistake, they exit the gene pool. And I talk about Stiglitz, who, when I was fighting, Fannie Mae, it's very simple. With this model of fragility, you realize that some firms are going to go bust. So I was fighting against all the risk managers by saying Fannie Mae was going to go bust in the US. It went bust, by the way. All right. So it cost us, between $500 billion and $1.25 trillion. Joe Stiglitz went and audited their thing, saw exactly what I saw, and said there's no risk to the shareholder and no risk to the government. He said the risk is virtually zero. Okay, that was not long before it went bust. Now, of course, we relied on it. And of course, Joe Stiglitz, not only he was not harmed, but he claimed to have predicted the crisis. So you see the idea. When you're not harmed by your mistakes, okay, you can bullshit people for very long. And bullshit you without knowing, and bullshit yourself without knowing. You see, so this is where the ethics is never harm others by your mistakes. Never tell people what to do, tell them what you do. That's it. And actually, when you go to the doctor, don't ask him what you should be doing. Ask him what he would be doing. Or he should be, if you were in your shoes. And psychologically, it's a switch that makes the answer all right, become a lot more realistic. So I think I've presented some facets of the idea. It's linked to the black swan in the sense that the idea of the black swan is that people didn't understand. It's not like let's go hunting for black birds no, it's that extreme events matter and are unpredictable. Mathematically, they will never be tractable. We can't tell their probability mathematically. That was a black swan, okay? And instead of being better at it, spending more money at trying to forecast these events, and we can't, while at the same time the world is becoming a lot more dominated by these events. The world is more unpredictable today. And think about it. Technology is nice if you put a human on the moon. Not that I just find it a very pleasant experience, but nevertheless, if you want to go on the moon, you can put a human on the moon, but you can't predict the climate, right? Definitely not the stock market. Saying the government can put, they think, why? Because complexity is complex, right? And the more scientists you put on it, the more unpredictable it gets, all right? And the more they think, because of some mental biases, that they can predict. Anyway, so forget about predicting. Let's worry about fragility. Fragility is very measurable. It's one step down intellectually from trying to understand the world. It's mostly trying to not be harmed by it. And we can do a lot of things. And that's sort of the idea of not to be a turkey, or to quote Fat Tony, not to be a sucker. That's his whole idea. Socrates wanted us to understand the world. Fat Tony said, no, try not to be a sucker. It's vastly more rigorous. And if you can show that the Fat Tony approach is vastly more rigorous, that's what should work. One other thing is, I was trying to find a title for my lectures, and it corresponds to a course I gave called Lectures on Risk in the Real World. And I realized how absurd to say risk in the real world, risk and decision making in the real world. As if, you say lectures on biology in the real world, or lecture on medicine in the real world. That's an alternative one. But the problem is that in social science, you can get away with something like that. Risk in a non-real world, and people start applying these in the real world. That's the problem with, so that's exactly what makes the black swan problem persist, because all these schmucks, they're not punished by their mistakes. You see, and then they have their journals published in their journals, and they're happy, all right? I showed something in 2008 that published in a refereed statistical journal, quite respected. I showed with 20 million pieces of data that there's something called kurtosis. You know what kurtosis is? Okay. It tells you how fat the tails are. There's some measure of tell you how away we are from the Gaussian, all right? Now, 80% of that measure comes from 1 day in 57 years, typically. So it means you don't even know how little we know about rare events, okay? So that, in a real science, we say, oh, this is a serious number. But the problem is, if you take it seriously, it reduces your income if you're a professor of, economics, or your paper is now not valid. So this is why you're not punished. If people are not punished by reality, you can end up with the world blowing up simply because you have these loops and that fragilize the world. So I think we can switch to Q&A, but if you ask me a boring question, let's go back to and read as planned from page 300 to 385, no? We can do that? It depends on, I think that Eleni has 2 questions, and John Faithful, and so we can maintain, the thing. If not, then I switch to the other plan B, all right? Great, thank you for listening to me. You can go now.
So you'll just make sure that we don't have microphones or anything like that, so make sure you talk loudly and you just raise your hand.
I repeat your question, or I will change it if I don't like it. And then so the rest can hear it. He's an economist. Right. No, I know, he told me, yeah.
Almost. So, Mr. Taleb, you mentioned in Antifragile that you're concerned with the apparent dismantling of organized religion, and that the collateral damage that could be done taking an institution that's been around for so long and removing it, and there's things that we don't know. But it seems there's another concern, and that is with technology, especially weapons of destruction type of technology growing. that we're creating a very fragile situation where you have people who believe in afterlife and so on, and play a mind game that if we had a bomb or some kind of weapon that could blow up the whole earth and just destroy everything, how many people would actually do it out of kindness and love?
That's very nice. Your question is good. So let me take the parts. The first one is that I believe that attacking religion is dangerous because the mind abhors a vacuum. And we lost religion. What did we replace it with? Think about it. Rationalism, Russia, Soviet Russia thing. And effectively, I'm going to give you a statistic. The first suicide bombers were not in the Near East, were not Islamic fundamentalists. They were Greek Orthodox, my tribe, communists.
Me too.
All right, communists in Lebanon. All right, so it's not like suicide bombing is not an invention of Islam. That's the first one. Effectively, people who are religious sort of know. I don't believe, to use a Greek word, pisteic. All right, religion isn't quite about belief; it's about some ritual. It has worked, except that in the modern world, we have too many religions in contact with each other. They should not be in contact with each other, and it causes, intolerance. I mean, it's not like I'm saying religion is good. I'm saying that the absence of religion, we know, is in a vacuum that is easily replaced by all kind of crazy beliefs, like they don't believe in religion, but they believe in economic predictions. I mean, if anyone uses the minimum standards of rationality that you apply for atheism and you apply it on Mr. Dawkins, who's an atheist, use of probability theory, you realize that there's no religious fundamentalism that is more irrational than his, or primitive than his use of probability, you see, or uses of rationality. Like I was arguing with Mr. Dennett, who's a gentleman, all these atheistic things. They say, oh yeah, no, we have science. Well, what do you mean by science? He says, science can put this building. He says, that's exactly the problem. Look at what science does. Right? It puts up Euclidean structures. All right? This is modernistic. There's this modernistic view of science replacing religion. If you understand science, it's all comes from non-scientists. Scientists understand how little we know about the world that is scientific. How many decisions we take every day that are probabilistic. Okay, how little compared to, and that's what a scientist would say. So this is why it's rarely you find a scientist, who would attack religion, all right, on the grounds that it's harmless. Belief in the stock market or belief in communism or some top-down state is a lot more harmful. That's the first one. The second point, every attempt at eradicating religion makes it come back with a vengeance. And this is, you think if we decide to remove harmful religion on grounds that it makes people blow up, makes them more intolerant. And we know from the places where they are very religious today are places where, take Russia, Soviet Union, try to get into, now it's Vespers every night, try to get into a church in Russia. Okay, it's standing room, of course there's always standing room, but you can't get close to a church on Sundays especially. They're so filled, okay? So religions come back with a vengeance when they try to repress them, and we saw that after the French Revolution, we see that in a lot of places, and we see it in Syria, which was Egypt, and Iraq. There were states that were secular states, a la top-down nation state, and how you had a religious boost after, when they were trying to move it. So you cannot eradicate religion from a top-down way, all right? And in fact, it's Dawkins himself who complains that they seem to hold beliefs, and the more evidence you give them, the stronger their beliefs. Well, the mechanism, that's anti-fragile. You try to bang on something, it gets stronger, right?
The more outrageous their claims. Yeah.
Exactly. But the point is that religion, the third one is more philosophical, and comes back to, now I understand that from, when writing the book, someone corresponded with me, a lot of it was Wittgensteinian, and told me, Wittgenstein saying it's like the anti, the Jones. In fact, he represented that way of thinking, and it's as follows: when I go to a movie, all right, if I took Dawkins to a movie, Dawkins is a guy like Steven Pinker, one of these guys, simple minds, but write books. So you take him, you put him in a movie theater, and you make him watch a movie, all right. he would interrupt the movie by saying, "This is nonsense. This is not blood, all right? This is not blood. This is tomato juice." No? Would he do that? No. You go for the ride. Why? You make believe for the purposes, it's called trust. The word belief in English is not epistemic. It's beloved. It has love in it. You stick, it's credere or pistebo. It's trust, right? The word belief has beloved is I trust something for the story. I go for the story. And in fact, if you think that religion has anything to do with God, you're completely missing the point. Most religions start with rituals and develop deities later, okay, to consolidate it rather than start with the deity and flows to develop rituals, okay? This is what you realize. So religion is something that makes people do things. And effectively, I'm going to give you some of the things that you get out of religion. It's a via negativa, what not to do. There's no way, rationalistically, you could enforce interdict on debt. And the minute Catholic countries lost Catholicism, they discovered two things in Europe: sex and debt. And they went wide on both. And look at the countries today that has most financial problems: Italy, Portugal, Spain, and Ireland. All right, they're the latest because Catholicism has a fatwa on lending that was stronger than Islam. If you read Aqidah, if you're a pure proper Catholic, you know neither borrower nor lender shall be. All right, so if you realize once you remove religion, you're removing some stuff that come with religion, like interdicts on debt. All right, via negativa. I like the via negativa. Don't do some things. They can only be enforced via religion, all right, initially, because people aren't smart enough to, you see, to do it and reason, and because to transmit the wisdom of the ages, okay? So this is what comes with it. The idea of a God is so minor in religion, not even funny. You see, this is what people don't get it. I mean, I'm offending a lot of people, but by saying God doesn't exist, it usually comes last in the whole deal of religion, all right? And all kind of formation of beliefs. So this is a credere versus credere means I trust, credit, letter of credit. I give credit to this. So you go for a story, and Wittgenstein gets it by saying our language isn't potent enough to express what we do. So let's not focus on linguistic things called belief. You see, that's what I have to say about religion. So I'm not in support of religion. If something has survived for so many millennia, all right, don't uproot it, okay, unless you better be certain that you're replacing it with something better. And so far, we've been fooled. Yeah?
What do you suggest to the people attending your lectures so that they don't get out of the lecture hall and behave the same way that they were behaving before in terms of fragility? Or
well, someone left the lecture hall and
no. When will you?
What?
When will you? Or what do you do to on your job in real life?
Oh, okay, heuristics, which comes with religion. So let me explain again the notion of heuristics. Okay, you can in a complex system, you will never be able to get people to do anything with a complicated, making them understand something complicated. You need a very simple heuristic. A heuristic is you know it's wrong. But you do it simply because, all right, okay, so in risk management, a heuristic is what I call the skin in the game rule. You apply the skin in the game rule, and application of skin in the game to a political domain is very simple. I have one skin in the game rule, very, very simple. Simply, nobody should cause risk without being harmed. Hence, owners of companies, managers of companies have to have more at lose than their bonus at any point in time, period. Okay, that's skin in the game rule. Another skin in the game rule is to prevent companies from being bailed out, okay, from being too big to fail. No company that would be deemed bailable out should it fail, should ever, okay, compensate its employees more than a civil servant. If you have to certify that you're not bailable out, so the taxpayer doesn't have anything to do with you. All right. If you're a hedge fund, if you go to a restaurant, you decide to give the waiter half your net worth, it's your problem. It doesn't entail taxpayer. But if you're paying the manager of the company, all right? And later on, the taxpayer would have to bail it out. Say Citibank paid $120 million to Bob Rubin. And then later on, Citibank went bust, he didn't return the money. We retrospectively are paying his salary, you see? So the taxpayer has to have a saying. Any firm that's bailable out or to be protected by the state, should it fail, should treat its employees like civil servants so you have skin in the game, all right? That's simple. So these are simple heuristics. Heuristics are powerful in reduction of information. For example, when I cross the street, I was fighting with some schmuck economist who was making some rules, because now we have a book of 3,000 pages of regulation. And I believe in less is more. When I cross the street, I'm not adding information. The eye color of every person in the street and the wind speed and stuff like that. When I want to cross the street, I look for two pieces of information. If there's something large, is it moving? Okay, the rest, I reduce information, you see. That's a heuristic. Heuristic reduces superfluous information, okay, to get by. And they survive not because the heuristic is evolutionary, but those with the right heuristics have survived. You see, that's my idea of what you do in a complex world. Heuristic. Via negativa is the first heuristic. If you're ill, the first heuristic is via negativa, all right? The remove stressful smoking. If you remove smoking, you save more money than, okay. If you remove sugar, you remove the New York Times, you remove things like that. So for example, I have my own via, each one has via negativa, all right? So for you, for example, it's probably not to go to Toronto, it would be a via negativa, right? Things, yeah, so you have, each one has its own via. So these are the tricks rather than complex rules. Now, let me talk about the health domain. Okay, let me continue a piece of my lecture and then talk about in terms of complex systems, all right? Nature is a great statistician. So I have this following heuristic. If any disease you have that is less than 3 standard deviations away from the norm, don't use a drug. More than 3 standard deviation, see 4 doctors and take the 4 prescriptions. Right? Okay, let me give you the rationale. Nature had 3 billion years and counting of tinkering. You agree? There's no single substance we have been able to find that has not been without side effects. Up till about a month ago, someone contradicted me. He said, Taleb is a schmuck, there's aspirin. But a month ago, a report came out that aspirin triples the risk of blindness. Okay, so that's it. So steroids, oh no, we have this. Trans fat, everything we find something, all right? So it looks like the natural, and if you're 1 or 2 standard deviations away, nature is better than, there's something convex, and let me explain. If you're 1 sigma away in blood pressure, you have 1 in 67 chances of being helped by any blood pressure medicine. The best, right? 1 in 67. If you're 4 standard deviations away, you have 80% chance of being helped by the medicine. And it's the same side effect. You see, for a potency that's more than 100 times higher, it's just, you see? So this is a heuristic, medical heuristic. I don't go to the doctor except when I'm ill, but when I'm ill, I see a lot of doctors and I take a lot more medicine than they give me. All right? You get the idea? You cheat, you see 2 of them, that you have twice medicine. Because rationally, that's what you gotta do, you see? So this is a very simple heuristic of interventionism and iatrogenics using the statistical attributes of nature. But the problem is pharma doesn't want you to do that. Why? Think about it. How many people have blood pressure or cholesterol 1 standard deviation away compared to those who have it 4 standard deviations away? Any statistician in the room? Sorry? 4,000 times more. So nature has seen 4,000 times more cases of the low blood pressure, okay? But also there are 4,000 times more. Now, if you're in the business of selling medicine, where's your market? The slightly ill, not the very ill. Number 1, the very ill, they die. They have the unfortunate habit of dying, right? 2, you can't, the other guy, you can keep him for 40, 50 years on a medication, you see? So this is how they think. So this is where we have a clash, and the only way you could do it is force people in pharma to take their drugs. That's the way to do it, right? You go force them to take their drugs, that's it. Right? I mean, we know a lot of tobacco growers used to smoke. And so here I'm giving you heuristics. We have time, no? Yeah, we have time. Yes.
Is there anything we could or should be doing to move towards epistemocracy?
Towards epistemocracy?
Yeah.
How to make society more, yeah. The first thing you should do is, the problem we have in society is people who supposedly should be defenders of knowledge are in fact promoters of some class of obscurantism in social science. And that is a big problem. Again, think of the world in which we live today compared to the world of granted, the person has to be a citizen, not slave, a Roman or Athenian citizen, or, we had bad press, but the Carthaginian or Tyrrhenian or something like this. The information you had about your world was statistically very sound. The information we have about our world is statistically unsound. People focus on Cyprus and economics. I tell them, you schmuck, are you now reading the New York Times to figure out the risk of Cyprus? 10 billion? It's a pimple, right? Or instead of focusing on these other risks, you see the idea. That's the problem in which we live. So the sensational seems to be driving science. Okay, people say one of the reasons also I don't like to be in these things, the top 50 papers pick a discipline. I mean, some of them can be like bowel, there's a journal called Bowel Theory, all right? Okay, or in something like in retina, or the 50 top, and then typically there's something, because of this neomania, these are more like Twitter, they disappear right away, and then you're flooded with this too much information. So this is where we're not functioning well, because people who should be rational aren't rational, and we're flooded with information, and we cannot deal with the information at that time scale. As much as I love randomness, I want less noise information-wise, and more noise in the surface and my visual space. This is why I can't live in cities anymore, okay? I want more noise when I want it, right? And more natural noise, birds and stuff like that, and less noise from information, and we're getting it backwards. And less noise from scientific papers. Yes?
So in Antifragile, you said that you don't give money to charities where anyone's drawing a salary, and you don't give when you're asked. But if there was a cause you really believed in and you were drawing a reasonable salary, don't you think it would make sense to want to kind of tell the world about what you're doing and to try and scale up?
Okay, this is a very important question, and that's a very big question. He's told me the heuristic that not me, but one of the characters, they are characters. There's a guy called Nero Tulip who's best friend and best enemies with Fat Tony, and they always have fights. Because Nero Tulip reads books, and Fat Tony despises books and people who read books. All right, but they're like twins, all right, in the sense of they think alike. So Nero Tulip doesn't give money to charities who ask for it. All right, no, to anyone who asks for money. All right, that's a heuristic. Second heuristic: if someone has a salary from a charity, you don't give them. All right, so they don't have metastatic charities and stuff like that. It's just a discipline, okay, that would apply regardless of the next argument I'm going to give. But the next argument is that the NGOs worry me for one reason. Some of them do a lot of good things, but some of them may be doing bad things. You see? There's say like giving computers to people and who are happy not getting Google News. You get the idea? So you don't know the side effects, you see? And they don't seem to be aware of side effects. To me, an NGO should first establish the heterogenics and then whether they should get into things. And so a lot of them promote stuff for development that has not so far helped too much in development. You see? The World Bank and the IMF are NGOs, no, sort of. equivalent. They're supposed to help the world, and I'm not sure if the World Bank is an agent of evil or an agent of, or a metastatic unit that works now to satisfy its bureaucrats. You get the idea. So this is what I worry about non-profit organization. Yes, go ahead.
Maybe then two important distinctions I'd like to suggest is NGOs that would like to put themselves out of business versus those that, there's kind of empire builders. And then also NGOs that publish failure reports.
No, definitely. There are metrics you can use. Someone who is thoughtful about what he's doing, all right, you can see it right away. If they look at the right things, the failure rate, what they're doing, they're introspecting about. But the thing is, when you go into a complex system and have an action that has, an NGO that would try to ban people from working for private sector after having been in government, I would give a lot of money to. You see, an NGO that would publish the names of people who get bribes indirectly, like Sarkozy working for a private equity firm, that revolving door, because it's like a contract you're making. You're nice to the industry because later on they hire you. If you're not nice, they won't hire you see. Or every regulator who later works for Boeing and blocked SpaceX from working, getting the contracts because he has friends at Boeing, they won't hire him, but later, you see. So an NGO that would stop people from using the public sector as an investment strategy. You see, people work for government, hey, it's good for my career later, you see. That kind of thing I would finance, you see. Because I know it's a via negativa NGO, an NGO that would go and every time you see someone smoking, snatch a cigarette from them and get a fine and be put in jail, but nevertheless, you get the idea. This I would finance. You see, so I'm not bland against NGOs, you see the point? But via negativa should come first. I think that people in the back, I have a predilection that have to understand for balance. Gender balance, but also hair balance. People who don't have a lot of hair are usually discriminated against. So all right. Especially if they have beards, so, but, okay, and meanwhile, Jean-Louis, you had a question.
Yeah, and one of your recommendations, okay, for how people could change things, you recommend that instead of challenging people that they're wrong, it says challenge them that they're unethical. And I know that generated a lot of different interpretations.
Yes.
Could you elaborate?
Yes, exactly. I have a motto. You have collective, frauds, okay, where everybody's doing it, and then you say you drown in a collective. See, because other people are doing it, it's okay. Or, why stop me on him? Stuff like that. You have collective. You also have collective acceptance of things, because, for example, in academia, I find aberration, but you say, oh, that's a system, and they make a joke about it, right? Like in the Soviet Union, they used to make a joke about the system as a way to solve a problem, right? So I have a motto that I've taken. You find it in the Bible, you find it in ancient Greeks, you find it, of course, in the Romans. Romans have phenomenal aphorisms for that. And, of course, my own rephrasing is, if you see fraud and don't shout fraud, you are a fraud, right? Okay, so you have to shout fraud if you see fraud, okay? You have to apply that. In the past, when you say, oh, these prediction methods of, my problem with the US government was deficits, is they predict oil price at $25 25 years down the road, and it's $90 no time later, all right? It's 2 years, 3 years later, and they don't think there's something wrong. They keep predicting, all right? They don't tell you I'm incompetent, all right? So visibly, it's something that's harmful because people make plans. Why publish a number? And we know psychologically people take a lot more risk when there's their projection. So you have to shout fraud, okay? So they're ethical thing, but a lot of people don't do it. Okay, one, because they're afraid of sticking out. They say, oh, everybody else is accepting it. Why are you sticking out? Oh, we know it's wrong, all right? The second one, there is that a lot of people, unless they make a living lying down or standing up, they're not really free, okay? So if you talk against the banking system, the bonuses, and you're in banking, you're not really free, all right? So there are a lot of people who try to fit ethics to their profession rather than fit the profession to their ethics. So they can work as a lobbyist for a tobacco firm by saying everybody got to make a living. Or tobacco is hiring a lot of farmers. They find what I call casuistry, an ethical spin, to justify what they're doing. So this is where, so they have a lot of elected. So I realized one thing. If you unconditionally shame people, if you tell them they're wrong, your predictions don't work, people tell you, you know, it's okay. But if you tell them that you're unethical to produce these predictions because they harm people and you're not harmed, they blow a fuse at me. I was at, I forgot to speak French and thank my Facebook friends who, you know, have a little salon, all right, for inviting me here. But I went to École Polytechnique, all right, for Mandelbrot's birthday, or his giving someone, he loved honors, so he was one of his honors, like the 3rd Legion of Honor was some whatever rank and stuff. Okay, so it's great. I went there, I went to give a talk, and I showed risk methods used, all right, and I said, shout, ce n'est même pas, ce n'est même plus une erreur. C'est immoral, like this. They blew a total fuse. In no time, the thing was cut off, all right? They were shocked, because you can call, if you call an academic, if you tell him he's wrong, he doesn't give a fuck, all right? So, if you tell him he's immoral, which they were, using something wrong, risk method, you're giving people risk things that don't work, all right? It's like giving the pilot of a plane the wrong information about his things, all right, visibly. You know, it's like removing stoplight, whatever, you get the idea. So they realize it's immoral. They look at themselves, me immoral? And they blow a fuse. So they go wild at me. And there's nothing that works better than the spreading of truth than people angry at you. Because there's something about truth that's anti-fragile. The more you try to hurt it, the more it's, you know, it blows up to the face. That's what I'm saying. So this is what it worked. But, so it was 2006 before the crisis. And the gentleman who blew up his face started shouting, "Je suis membre de l'Académie des Sciences." All right? You know, okay. My idea is, est-ce qu'ils font du trading d'options à l'Académie des Sciences? But it was this was the thing, and nobody knew my books in France. Next day, the bookstores were completely. There was no Amazon active in 2006. There were no. They had to go reprint because no more books in bookstores. So that was what the idea was. Calling people immoral, it makes anyone can be. You say, oh, it's a different theory, but immoral. Then they look inside and they feel something dirty in them, all right? And when you call predictors immoral, I've had some experiences of people blowing a fuse when you call them immoral. And they are objectively immoral. Okay, because nobody wants to think of themselves as immoral. Especially immoral people. Yes, Jean-François.
About switching on microphones. Turkeys are actually blackbirds with a lot of colors. Okay, they live in the wild. They like to live in families. Eventually, they were domesticated, and they all became white. And fact only talks about turkeys, but they're all ran by turkeys farmers. And you don't talk about people who make a profession, maybe New York Times journalists, of raising turkeys.
Okay, he's right. He's saying, I don't talk about the turkey farmers. You know, the turkeys have a farmer. But effectively, because I don't think there's a conspiracy. You see, people think that there's a large-scale military-industrial complex conspiracy. No, they're all too incompetent to have a. When you think about it, people think, oh, there's a conspiracy. There's no conspiracy. They're way too incompetent, all right? And lack of encouragement. It just so happens that there are some biases in the system that start to exist with firms that become very large and they're friendly to their friends. Crony capitalism, which is neither capitalism nor socialism. Select capitalism for a group of friends. Can I have, you know, someone has, Mon Royaume. Let me give you Antifragility story with water 1 minute. So it looks like it's an attribute of the system, the side effect of the system. And then it blows up, you see? So people are natural turkeys, but typically in a good system, you'd have a system blown up periodically. It fails fast, and then you can continue, you see? But here we have too much systematic prolongation of turkey period, and boom, blow up. Then prolongation of turkey period, then blow up. Now talking about water, if you want to understand antifragility, there's no liquid that tastes better, that money can buy, that's better than water if you're monstrously thirsty, as I am now, in case someone has a bottle of water, right? So this is a variation. Instead of drinking all the time. Tu en as une? Wait, Eleni, we found one. Okay. Well, we got, you see, it worked. My technique worked.
I was going to send my daughter.
No. So there's nothing better than when you're very thirsty, water, all right? So this is what you, if you want to understand why making life comfortable, you're removing the existence out of humans. You see, comfort, too much comfort. So we should focus, what is called the barbell, on preventing extremes. You want to prevent people from dying of hunger, but you want to encourage periods of hunger, because if you don't have periodic hunger, you develop Alzheimer. Now we are certain diabetes. Okay? You see? Let's see, another heuristic. The first cure should be starvation, or, you know, as they used to do it. You and then him, yeah.
Okay. Some of my students were asking if they could ask you a question in Arabic, and I said that's not a problem. So please don't make me a liar. So if I have
I lied. I said I speak Arabic. I don't.
I said that you could speak the language. So if anybody wants to, I said you can ask him questions in English and French.
But I'm sure they also speak English. They can also ask it. He had a question. He was first, and then in the middle, yes.
Is there a transitory relationship between heuristics and dogma?
And what?
And dogma.
Dogma. Heuristics is the exact opposite. A heuristic, you know, is wrong, but it's a rule that you know works because you don't want to spend a lot of time. A dogma is something that you know is right, and it's totally inflexible. Typically, heuristics are vastly more convex, and dogma is a lot more concave. And this I'm showing is a little involved. You see, it takes me about 20 years to clarify my ideas. But so now it's at the mathematical stage. I have to find words. But heuristic is convex by nature, because a heuristic is something that you know has a bias, is wrong, but has helped people in a situation. You see, has helped survival. That's my idea of heuristic. And a dogma is something that is inflexible, comes from the Apollonian or System 1, and typically is concave because sort of optimized. This is sort of like the idea. So this is where the difference is. Yes, go ahead.
But if a heuristic becomes outdated, is there a risk of it becoming?
Heuristics cannot become outdated because you know it's wrong. So the minute you see it doesn't work anymore, you modify it. You see? Dogmas you don't modify. You get the idea. That's just the beauty of a heuristic. If you start knowing that, hey, you know what? I like to buy my milk on Monday morning, all right? I don't shop on Friday because supermarkets are empty, all right? This is sort of a heuristic, all right? You're not making a big deal out of it. You know, it's something that's a trick that works. The minute it doesn't work a couple of times, all right? This is it. This heuristic has a small loss when it's wrong. You see, this is what defines to me a convex heuristic. When it's wrong, the loss is small. So if you go to the store a couple of times on Monday or on Tuesday as compared to Friday, you see, and see more food, then you revise your heuristic, you see? So a heuristic is you don't have to go through the analysis every time. And it sort of works, and being wrong, by definition, has a small cost. You see the idea. And you know it's wrong. That's the beauty of it. It's sort of like a fail-fast type approach to knowledge. There's a, yes, go ahead.
Having a model is always wrong. Like, what happens to economics right now?
Sorry, repeat.
Just having a model studying the world around us in a rational manner or whatever. Is it always wrong, or it has something?
Let me tell you the problem of people thinking having rationality is always wrong. No, by definition, rational is not wrong, knowing wrong. The problem, what they call, is what we call naive rationality. Naive irrational model is what I call the Procrustean bed. Is you simplify things. Unlike a heuristic doesn't harm. You simplify things. Oh, sorry, my cell phone is on. My God. Okay. The problem. The heuristic is, of course, you know it's wrong. All right. Someone thinks he understands what's going on. You see, thinks this is what's going to happen. We're going to build a big highway. It's going to help everyone. And because the state should build big highways, maybe the state shouldn't be building highways. Maybe building highways would cause people to go move in the suburbs, and it destroys nature. You get the idea. This is sort of where rationality, top-down, has always failed us, typically. Not because it's not rational. This is what I'm using is this. Okay, I'm saying it's not rational to follow these rationalistic Kant method. In a bed of Procrustes, you have people who, when they want to fit someone in a bed, they cut the legs, to make to have a perfectly fitting bed. All right? Well, that's not how it should be working. No, you should lengthen the bed. So this is the Procrustean bed type of rationality. To me, is a dangerous form of. But the problem is, people who don't have contact with reality, they tend to have that. And people who had, good grades in school, they tend to be like that. They think they understand a lot because they understood the exam. So it's not, the exams are not ecological, and we're more and more selecting people to run society based on grades that are not ecological. So in fact, it means that maybe they get good grades for overcompensation for lack of ecological intelligence, all right? Instead, why don't you look at it this way, rather than, say they're intelligent, which is why, this education system doesn't work well, because it selects improperly people. So this is what rationality, it's not rational. Incidentally, there's something, I noticed naive rationality. There's a fellow called Robert Merton, who, of course, like a lot of economists who are wrong, wrote something called the rational option pricing, theory of rational option pricing. And if you read it, you realize that it's not rational. It's wrong, visibly. So, there's a model of rationality that's higher that makes it all wrong.
So the economy is still useful?
Sorry?
Economy is still useful?
Well, there's an effect of economists lecturing birds how to fly can harm the birds if they stop listening. Okay, so I don't know if economists have been useful to us. We know that for a long time doctors were harmful. Till penicillin, they were killing. So economists, I think, they're doing a lot more harm than doctors then. But take this crisis, take the models, you can tell what is wrong with them. There's someone, the gentleman has a beard and has lack of hair, so he wins.
Thank you. You've been speaking about epistemology and kind of delving into deontology a little bit.
Yes.
In terms of morality and ethics, do you think that there is good and evil, and that there are those who are rooting for the bad guys in the movie, or is it really just incompetence and mistakes that are amplified with complexity and good intentions that are being misguided?
This is where is asking me a question whether people are making mistakes or are they bad people. All right. In the end, I have no fucking clue. All right. I'm not an intellectual. I know there is I have no clue. But whether they're bad people, like Socrates would think that they're only misinformed, because if they knew, nobody, would be doing harm. This, maybe it's true. I don't want to get into. My point is very simple: how not to be a turkey, all right, and how to have a society that's robust, all right, and gains from randomness. That's my idea. Now, whether you have to go through so I don't ask. I'm not. I can't. I'm not a public intellectual. This is very strange. I'm focusing on one point, on fragility and risk. So, but I don't know about your answer. But now come back to deontic, all right? Deontic, the duties. Yes, definitely there are sets of duties and rigorous. And in fact, it could be dogma. My skin in the game is beyond the heuristic, moral heuristic, and it's dogma. Why? I don't know why. There are a small number of things that should be immutable, that you should never take a risk that entails others without taking a risk yourself. Like, repair people on helicopters should take helicopter rides. And effectively it makes the rate drop. But also, not just in the risk space it works, this is Hammurabi's code, but all of society had very few little rigorous tricks or laws to operate. And the first one was lex talionis, eye for eye. But before that, Hammurabi's code. And it all has to do with symmetry. So symmetry, I harm you, you can't harm someone without being harmed. You can't risk, without incurring risk. You can't do this. So maybe, without getting into deep problems, it's a very simple way for things to survive, since we've been living in societies, from Babylonians, that require this kind of symmetry to exist between people. So maybe that's if it's going to have dogma, that's a dogma, and maybe they don't take that. Your duty is to take risks. But when I take risks, for example, when I was managing money, and I'm down money and the client calls to tell me to complain, I know I've lost 50 times more as a proportion of my net worth than he did. It's liberating. Like you don't feel shame. So it's liberating. To have skin in the game is also a selfish thing, to feel, hey, you know what? But if otherwise I'd feel shame, you see. You'd feel shame plus there's something about skin in the game that makes things work right. I was talking about traffic. I noticed driving that everybody has skin in the game. This is why traffic, only produces a very high number of fatalities, 38,000 in the United States, but still, compared to what can go wrong, you see, is why? Because every single individual has skin in the game. All the way. Passengers and drivers and everything. The person up there? No, here, yes.
What's your view on Austrian economics, given that it rejects a lot of the statistical methods that you seem to hate in other forms of economics?
Okay, I share the Austrian economics rejection of current statistical models. I don't reject statistical models. You see, the problem why Austrian economics have not survived among economists, in a way, I am a non-Turkey economist, classical economist. I'm just non-Turkey with one layer of risk consciousness and ethics that I'm adding to it, and transform the whole thing from Procrustean bed to a real bed, you see. So Austrian economy, they have this blank rejection of statistical methods. And if you see, there's things statistically I accept, and there are statistical properties that are, you see the beauty of probability that makes it rigorous, is that even in Russia, probabilities add up to 1. So that puts some boundaries on the classes of distribution that you have. And within that, so you don't have to be exactly a Turkey with statistics, but there's things you can discover. So methodologically, they had this blanket rejection, which made them, alienated from the rest of the economics profession. Now, I'm alienated from the economics profession because I think that you guys stop here. You should continue here to add a layer of risk, you see. So, so maybe my ideas will be accepted one day, or maybe they already have them. They're not telling me, and then But the Austrian economy is not compatible with the other. So this is why they're going to stay at the margin. Plus, their ideas are dogma. I mean, someone talking about dogma is dogmatic. A little too dogmatic. It's a lot of sound ideas, but it's dogmatic. Hayek is different from the other classical, thinking that knowledge is not top-down, but shared by, in a tacit way. That's sort of Dionysian, sort of. Yes?
The European Union became fragile because it centralized its economy. In order to make it robust and avoid the problems that they have now, should we let Spain and Italy and Ireland to go bust?
I have no idea what should be named. Spain and Ireland and Italy go bust. But one thing I'm going to say about Europe is that the United States has twice the deficit that Europe has. So at least Europe seems to be concerned about their deficits. Okay, so this is why, I mean, people talk about Cyprus, they dance, but in the end, the big problem is that, you have to look at things like cancer, all right? You have to worry not about the person who's gone on a cancer treatment. You have to worry about the person who has cancer but doesn't know it, okay, has not been treated. And the United States is more a person, and Europe is more like a treated cancer patient. So it's going to make the news, but you know. And effectively, I was in Canada not long ago and I made a statement about Europe being robust, and the euro is 10% lower than or 8% lower than what it is now. And I always said, this guy's nuts. But think about it. Europe, if you look at the currency and the markets, the currency, you'd think, oh, the past 3 years it would have been at zero. In fact, it's stronger than it was relative to the dollar. So visibly, someone may know something about financial markets that's Hayekian, right? The journalists don't know. Don't rely on journalists. Europe isn't as sick as they make it out to be. Some parts of Europe, of course, have problems, but they focus on the salient problem, like the death from hurricanes, rather than death from high fructose corn sugar. Hold on, I mean, yeah, we still have time.
You talk a lot about, or you talked a lot today about how our our current setup of academia has failed us. Do you have a vision for how we could change our education system, the way our universities work, the way...
Yeah, I don't know for a university if you can change, because universities have bureaucrats and they have tenures. You can't change them. Don't try to change them. The way you do it is you change the reputation, okay? What matters is your education. Today, thanks to the web, you can go, I mean, I remember, when I was a kid, I didn't have Wikipedia. Now I go on Wikipedia and I was developed an interest in elephants, all right, because of the size, and I went on Wikipedia. I had this wonderful education on elephants, you see. Now, when you say education, it's not formal education, but global, you know, the other education, you get it, you have so much, we've never been, you know, for someone wise, all right, exposed to these things, okay? Formal education, you should try to you tell people get degrees, but don't get more than a pass. Because if you focus too much on knowing a lot about things you're going to forget later, you're wasting your you know, instead of starting companies and stuff like that. So what, get an A and something you're going to forget about 2 months later, completely, all right? Isn't, you know, you get the idea. And what I said here in the book is, I had a great education because I never tried to get more than a C, all right? And sometimes you overshoot to have a buffer margin, all right? And so sometimes you overshoot, all right? So by accident I got some education. But my idea is to read as many books as possible, because I thought that people who used to get good grades, they knew nothing outside those grades, okay? And I was reading books like wholesale, all right? So I said, okay, so I realized that education was what's stopping me from having these. And when I read on my own, I wrote, I still remember. Everything I was given to study, I forgot. But what I read, driven with my own curiosity, I still remember. So education should be like in the old days. You have a big library, and now anybody can have it if you have access to Wi-Fi. You know, you go to Starbucks, you get it for free. So you know, so you have a big library. So I'm glad. I mean, we have a new generation of people who can have whatever a la carte education they want, provided they don't spend too much time doing that stupid homework. All right, and don't take economics classes. These are two things. All right. Take gardening. Gardening is very useful. And this is why I substitute gardening. If you don't take no economics, take gardening. Take no statistics, because it's, you know, it gives you these metrics. Take some mathematics of probability. Then you can redo it yourself. Just you know, take computer science and accounting, and I don't know, dancing. It could be useful or something like that. So, but these things are. But getting A's is you know. Plus, there's something about a nation. You know that grades, we know, at the national level, education washes out. But within families, grades help you get ahead, you see? So it's a zero-sum game. You want to go away from zero-sum games. That's what you want to do, go away from zero-sum games. And this is why academia, I hate academic life, because zero-sum games. Someone gets an honor, automatically everybody else went down, you know, to, you know, sort of like, whereas in commerce, in the souk, everybody makes money, everybody's happy, all right? So this is so in knowledge it's the same. In honors and degrees, it's zero-sum. He got a doctorate. I don't have one. All right, I'm an idiot now. He's a big shot. It doesn't work that way in real life. You see. So more questions. The bald guy to the left. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, but you know we're discriminated against, so we have to understand.
You wrote in your book like several examples on how like risk, randomness, and variability is in our life, and you end by saying you should love it. So what type of responsibility does that give like entitled an individual, like being aware of it, but put it on? Like,
You should have as much variability as you can afford that's not lethal.
so I should kill myself to try to.
Sorry?
I should expose myself to as much risk as possible, but not kill myself.
Small risks, small variability. If you have a portfolio that's volatile, long term it's a lot more safer than portfolios that don't change but can collapse. Okay? You should be exposed to more germs, more variability in your habits, more starvation periods, and then feast and famine, more changes of patterns. You should be, that way you shock your system. Once in a while, sleepless night. And then all of these have medical evidence now. I tabulated there. It's in the back of the book. And I've discovered more. The thermal variability is good to strengthen your system against all kind of stress. Deprivation of carbs for a while is good for neural, protection, neuroprotective. It doesn't mean that you should stay without carbs. You should have periods with a lot of carbs and periods without carbs. Just like our food sources, we're omnivores not because we like to eat steaks with salads and then fruits. We're omnivores because serially you survive in different environments. These environments don't give you steaks and salads. You go for salads when you can't do it better, and steaks when they're there. So you should have more stochasticity in the composition as well. So I've tabulated these all from. You can measure it. You can measure that from simple. You take medical paper and see if there's gain, see if there's convexity, and then make rules out of it. Go ahead.
But I mean, like outside of myself, when you say when you see fraud, you should shout fraud. Should I explain to people that there's risk, volatility, and fragility outside?
If there is fraud and you don't shout frauds, you are part of it. You have to understand that. This is what the collective enters. You are part of it. Period. That's collective responsibility, and religion tried to destroy it, failed, but religion say you should not join the multitude to do evil. And there's 50 Greco-Roman sayings, and there are even legal sayings about collective, like you're not immune. So shouting fraud is a duty, is a citizen's duty. And then again, what my metric? Is my metric GDP? Is my metric how many years I'm going to live? Or my metric is how honorable I'm going to live? Well, it's very strange. The more I shout fraud, the more honorable I feel. So instead of saying I do it for gain, I'm not doing it for gain. I'm doing it for loss. I want to be deprived of source of income, but I want to feel. I mean, think about the metrics of an ancient person. Well, what's better? Is it better to have an honorable life, or have a long life, or have a comfortable life, have a rich life, right? So if you look at it, if you think the metric of an honorable life comes first, then everything else becomes easy. You don't have to kill yourself, but if you see fraud, if you don't tolerate, have total intolerance for kind of bullshit that goes around, it works. You see, and even okay, I'm not going to tell you I do it as an investment strategy for my life, but hasn't called the fraud a fraud has not harmed me. Although it may harm me now, and I'm. There's always lawsuits that may be brewing, but I don't know if lawsuits would harm me only except financially. But you get the idea. So calling a fraud is a duty. So there's another hand.
Last question.
Yeah.
Last question.
So you talk about heuristics and you advocate them, but don't you think they're themselves by filtering out information for Christian bets?
No. But the whole idea of the difference between a Procrustean bed heuristic and a convex heuristic is these heuristics don't fall from the sky, and they have to have some properties. If I have a heuristic to jump out of the window every time I see one, it's not going to be very good. Or you see the idea, okay? If I have a heuristic, so heuristics don't fall from the sky. The notion of having heuristics is to always have less is more rules that work sort of in a broader set than the one in which they were formulated. But it doesn't mean all heuristics are good. This is a logical fallacy. And doesn't mean that anything, because anything bad can be, described as a heuristic. Every time you see an old lady walking by a rubber, that's a heuristic, right? I mean, it may, I don't know if it's going to help you. You get the idea. You have to be very selective. But typically, the power goes to the heuristics that have survived, but more importantly, whose practitioners have survived. This is what I call the Lindy effect. So you have to give, like now we have a heuristic. I mean, there's a lot of, I was going to mention fasting, but it's beyond a heuristic. It's sort of like a religious practice. But there's things, rules that have survived. And these heuristics sometimes work, even if locally they seem silly and stupid. You see? Even if they seem silly and stupid, the fact that they have survived may hide something from it. Okay, so look, thank you very much. We spoke a lot.